Great. Asked about the upcoming congressional testimony of former FBI Director Comey, the White House spokesman Sean Spicer told reporters they are focused on the president's agenda, and going forward, they will be referring those questions to outside counsel. Brett.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, he promised to do it in the campaign. Tonight, there are signs President Trump will withdraw the U.S. from the Paris climate change agreement. Well, the president is insisting no official decision has been made yet. Sources expect him to pull the trigger soon, at least on some level of a withdrawal or renegotiation. All this occurs against the backdrop of an incredibly tasteless video and what appeared to be a typo in a tweet that then got a very strange follow-up at the White House. All of this is day 121 of the Trump administration. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is on top of it all from the North Lawn again. Good evening, John.
Brad, good evening to you. During the election campaign, President Trump promised to bring back American manufacturing and create jobs. The question tonight, can he make good on that promise and still stay in the Paris Climate Accord? In the Oval Office with the Vietnamese Prime Minister today, President Trump wouldn't tip his hand on which way he'll go on the Paris Climate Accord, but said a decision is imminent. At the G7 meetings in Sicily last week and at the NATO summit, President Trump told America's allies he truly cares about the environment, but he's also concerned that adhering to the strict protocols of the Climate Accord could risk the U.S. falling behind nations like China and India in manufacturing and job creation.
All the burden, once again, is on the United States to adhere to things that other countries aren't willing to do. And I think this president is looking at this and saying, I'm here as the president of the United States. Is this the right thing for our country?
Well, several sources who spoke to Fox News believe the president will make a clean break from the accord. One suggested the president may seek a middle ground, withdraw from certain agreements like the Green Climate Fund, but stay in the overall framework of the deal. The possible nuance of a decision made no impact on Democrats. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer tweeting, quote, "We must do all we can to protect our planet as well as our economic security. Withdrawing from Paris Agreement would put this in jeopardy." Even the president's allies warned against pulling out. Tesla SpaceX CEO Elon Musk, who sits on a number of White House advisory councils, tweeted, quote, "Don't know which way Paris will go, but I've done all I can to advise directly to POTUS through others in White House and via councils that we remain." When asked what he'll do if the president withdraws, Musk replied, quote, "We'll have no choice but to depart councils in that case." The president today lashed out on Twitter, ripping comedian Kathy Griffin for a photo showing her holding a mocked severed head of the president. President Trump tweeting, quote, "Kathy Griffin should be ashamed of herself. My children, especially my 11-year-old son Barron, are having a hard time with this. Sick." The photo drew a rare public rebuke from the First Lady in a statement to Fox News saying, quote, "As a mother, a wife, and a human being, that photo is very disturbing. When you consider some of the atrocities happening in the world today, a photo opportunity like this is simply wrong. Makes you wonder about the mental health of the person who did it." The president also left the nation scratching its head after sending out a bedtime tweet last night that ended with the word "covfefe." It looked like a simple typo of the word coverage, but this morning the president made a game of it, tweeting, quote, "Who can figure out the true meaning of covfefe? Enjoy." The White House press corps wondered why it took hours for the original tweet to be deleted and whether the president needed a better Twitter monitor, prompting this rather cryptic response from the press secretary.
The president and a small group of people know exactly what he meant.
The simplest explanation would have been that the president sent out a tweet with a typo and didn't notice it last night before he went to bed. But Brett, simple somehow rarely seems to apply here at the White House.
And we still don't know covfefe definition.
There's no official definition, but there certainly are some creative ones out there on the internet.
And definitely on Twitter. John, thank you.
Right.
A physician from Philadelphia is in custody tonight after authorities found a rifle and a handgun in his car, plus 90 rounds of ammunition at the Trump International Hotel just down the street from the White House here in Washington. Metro Police and the Secret Service say they received a tip about 43-year-old Brian Moles just before he checked into the hotel early this morning. They say he was behaving suspiciously and was making threatening remarks. Former Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton came out swinging at a tech conference in California this afternoon, indicating who she blames for losing last fall's election. Here's a hint. Not a lot of focus on the candidate herself in those statements today. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin, who covered the Clinton campaign for Fox News, shows us what happened. And basically, Jennifer, Hillary Clinton unplugged today.
Absolutely, Brett. In fact, this was Hillary Clinton as I have not seen her before, unplugged, as you mentioned. It was as though she were laying out a case for not only why she lost the election, pointing fingers for the first time about who it was from the Trump campaign who she believes colluded with the Russians during the election, and in her words, weaponized data to tilt the election. She makes the case against New York hedge fund heiress Rebecca Mercer, whose family fortune teamed up with an analytic firm in England called Cambridge Analytica to not only affect the outcome of the Brexit vote in England, but also to help the Trump campaign. Her condition, that Trump hire Steve Bannon and Kellyanne Conway to run the campaign.
The Mercers did not invest all that money just for their own amusement. We know they played in Brexit, and we know that they came to Jared Kushner and basically said, we will marry our operation, which was more, as it's been described, psychographic sentiment, a lot of harvesting of Facebook information. They married content with delivery and data, and it was a potent combination. Now, the question is, where and how did the Russians get into this? And I think it's a very important question. The Russians, in my opinion, and based on the intel and counter-intel people I've talked to, could not have known how best to weaponize that information unless they had been guided. And here's
guided by Americans.
Guided by Americans and guided by people who had, polling and data
Who
information.
Is that? Clinton said her email scandal was a, quote, nothing burger. She said she and her campaign tried to get people to focus on Russian interference in the election rather than her emails. She also blamed Facebook as a key reason she lost.
And there have been some studies done since the election that if you look, let's pick Facebook, if you look at Facebook, the vast majority of the news items posted were fake. They were connected to, as we now know, the 1,000 Russian agents who were involved in delivering those messages. They were connected to the bots that are just out of control.
Clinton also took aim at the Democratic Party, saying she, quote, inherited nothing from them in terms of data analytics, adding the party was bankrupt when she got the nomination, Brett.
I mean, Jennifer, it was stunning, the level of detail on the technical side, then going after the DNC. I mean, essentially going after President Obama, who laid it out for her campaign.
Well, that's right. In fact, she had hired many of President Obama's analytic team. That is what she had inherited. But the way she took aim not only at the DNC, she really, there was also a moment where she seemed to blame the Obama administration for not taking her and her campaign's concerns seriously about the Russian interference in the election.
None of that list told her not to show up in Wisconsin. It's pretty amazing. Jennifer, thank you very much. More on this with the panel. As their former nominee is ripping the DNC, Democrats in Washington are really trying to rally the faithful against the Trump agenda. Tonight, Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel looks at what the Democrats hope to accomplish in the next few months.
Democrats are revealing their summer playbook, trying to tap into anger their base is feeling. Texas Democrat Congressman Mark Vesey explained why he was dressed down, offering up some red meat in Dallas today.
We have to take on the President of the United States. We have to take on Paul Ryan. We have to take on Mitch McConnell. It's time for us to take our jackets off. It's time to take our ties off. And it's time to start fighting.
House Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi tried to energize a labor and activist audience.
So the middle class, which is the backbone of our democracy, really depends on our activism in the resistance summer.
And Pelosi issued this call to action in order to protect Obamacare.
Say, call your member of Congress and tell him or her not to take away our health care.
Others are taking to social media.
We'll fight our hearts out here. I mean, that's the deal. I will. I'm fighting before I wake up in the morning, and I'm still fighting when I go to bed at night.
There are also efforts to continue harping on the ongoing Russia investigations. 3 Democrat senators, Carper of Delaware, Heinrich of New Mexico, and Peters of Michigan, sent this letter to Director of National Intelligence Dan Coats earlier this month. Quote, We write to request a review and damage assessment regarding whether any classified information may have been disclosed by the president or his senior advisors to representatives of the Russian government during a meeting in the Oval Office on May 10, 2017. At an event last night in New York with former late-night host David Letterman, Minnesota Democrat Senator Al Franken talked about, quote, some cooperation between the Trump campaign and the Russians, adding, I think everything points to that. Franken was asked about that assessment of interaction between some in the president's inner circle and Russian officials this morning.
These meetings weren't disclosed, and there's a whole bunch of these from Trump administration officials or former Trump administration officials. They aren't acting like people who have nothing to hide.
A year ago, it was the Trump campaign and Republicans attacking Hillary Clinton's handling of classified information and her use of a private email server. Perhaps a sign of lessons learned by Democrats from the 2016 campaign. Brett?
Mike, thank you. President Trump has called Afghanistan's leader to express condolences over the killing of dozens of people in a massive suicide truck bombing today in Kabul, Afghanistan. Americans are said to be among the hundreds injured. So far, no group has claimed responsibility. A massive attack added to a number of them in recent days and weeks. Correspondent John Huddy is following the story from our Middle East newsroom.
The black cloud of smoke rose from the site of one of the worst terror attacks in Kabul since 2014, and as some Afghan officials said, the worst ever in the city. 90 people were killed, more than 450 others injured, including 11 U.S. security contractors. Afghan police officials say a sewage truck loaded with explosives blew up during rush hour in the Wazir Khan district of Kabul, just outside the city's heavily fortified green zone. It happened near the German embassy, where several of its employees were injured and an Afghan security guard was killed. The Taliban denied responsibility, though the terror group has launched major attacks in Kabul recently and vowed to carry out even more. It's possible this was the work of ISIS.
Our intelligence is working to find out who exactly was behind this incident.
Today's attack comes as the White House is considering deploying an additional 5,000 troops to join the already 8,000 on the ground in Afghanistan.
It is a dangerous place, but we have the back of the Afghan people and of the government, and we want to make sure that we're doing all we can. We are heavily invested in Afghanistan, and we're heavily invested in seeing it stable.
But today's bombing raises questions if Afghan troops are up to the task of keeping their country safe and stable. The Wazir Khan district is known to be one of the most secure parts of Kabul, with numerous security checkpoints. So how a truck loaded with explosives made it through is unclear. What is clear is that as the bloodied and burned men, women, and children were carried away from the blown-out areas around the 13-foot deep bomb crater, a message was sent: no one is safe. And President Trump spoke with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani today, expressing his condolences, as mentioned, and strongly condemning the attack in Kabul. Whether or not this has any bearing on the decision to send more troops to Afghanistan, well, that remains to be seen. Brett.
John Huddy, live in our Middle East newsroom. John, thank you. Senior Pentagon officials say the U.S. has begun arming Kurdish elements within the Syrian Defense Forces. It's a move that has outraged U.S. ally Turkey, which considers the Kurds terrorists. But U.S. officials say the Kurds are the best fighting force against ISIS inside Syria. The weapons include small arms, ammunition, and vehicles. The Kurds are preparing for what is expected to be a long, bloody battle to try to recapture the ISIS stronghold. We'll show you the moment of impact when a U.S. interceptor missile shot down an ICBM.
Name to remember.
Pentagon officials say they're not concerned about the Russian firing of 4 cruise missiles at an ISIS base inside Syria. U.S. military commanders say it was warned about in